Shalom, everyone. Thank you for joining us, everyone online, and those of you here and those of you on Zoom for our Torah Tuesday service. We are in Exodus chapter 21. We're going to be beginning with verse 14. That's where we left off last Tuesday. And we do our studies from this wonderful book by Jerry Watkins. Hopefully you can see that good. Okay. And you can get this book online at torahtogether.com. And so that's what we're doing our studies from. So we're going to begin here in Exodus 21, verse 14. And does anybody want to read? 21:14.
How far? How far do you want to go?
We're going to go to 30. Well, let's go to 17.
Okay. Try to get the chapter here. Go. 21:14. If, however, a man acts presumptuously towards his neighbor so as to kill him craftily, you are to take him even from my altar that he may die. And he who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. And he who kidnaps a man, whether he sells him or he is found in his possession, shall surely be put to death. And he who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. And if
yeah, so we'll stop there at 17. Sorry. That's okay. So why do you think the sins described in verses 15 through 17 carry the death penalty? So remember, there's a difference between these sins that carry a death penalty because you cannot bring an offering versus all the other sins we see in Scripture where you're allowed to bring an offering and atonement and forgiveness is made and you're still in the camp, you're still with the people, there's no separation, but yet these here are bringing about death. And this is, so what's interesting is because this is what it says in the New Testament was nailed to the cross. The sin and death, or I would say the sin that causes death. Very interesting. So what's different, or why do these carry the death penalty? Intentional? I would say all three of these sins involve attacks against parents and violate the fifth commandment. So we got direct violation of honor. So if you can't honor your parents, you're surely not going to be able to honor God. So here's a direct violation of the fifth commandment, and it now brings about the death penalty. God evidently considers the honoring of parents and respecting of parents very important. Note, cursing here involves more than merely swearing. It implies an aggressive spiritual attack on one's parent. So it's a spiritual attack against the parents, not just, a cuss word here or there. This is a very direct spiritual attack on the parent. Hi, bud. Okay. Any comments or questions about these three verses that carry the death penalty?
A quick question. So they carry the death penalty because they broke the fifth commandment?
They're in direct violation of the fifth commandment of honoring your mother and your father.
So that makes me wonder about the other commandments. Do they carry the death penalty too, or is it because of the...
Well, we'll find. I think we're going to find out as we, because we talked about a couple of weeks ago that it didn't end at the 10th commandment. It's continuing on. And so the sad thing is because people didn't continue to look and hold these other commandments as viable in their life, when they commit infractions on it, they don't realize there's literally a spiritual death penalty that's come against them. Yeah. So very serious stuff. Okay. Let's read verses 18 through 21.
When men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die but keeps his bed, then if the man rises again and walks abroad with his staff, he that struck him shall be clear, only he shall pay for the loss of his time and shall have him thoroughly healed. When a man strikes his slave, male or female, with a rod, and the slave dies under his hand, he shall be punished. But if the slave survives a day or two, he is not to be punished, for the slave is his money.
Okay. 21. All right, so verses 18 through 21 deal with what today would be called assault and battery. All right? What is the main focus of the punishment? I would say it's right here. Restitution. So this is something that's not talked about in churches, that I just go and tell them you're sorry, all is good to go. But what about the things that require restitution? So that's missed out a lot because, again, we don't look at these as viable. I don't know how to handle this. But, God's interested in the person that's been wronged not only should have an apology, but in these instances, restitution should be made to, as it says here, pay for his loss of time and take care of him until he's completely healed. That means I don't need to worry about health care. Because if I'm wronged by somebody to where I'm injured, they're going to take care of me out of their pocket. They're going to make sure that I'm, all my needs are met, whatever it is. So doesn't that change things about, I'm going to pop you. Well, wait a minute. If I pop you, I've got to now take care of your broken tooth. If you miss work because you can't go, I've got to cover all your wages. That solves a lot of those potential issues because now the burden lays upon the person that brings about the harm. He's got to bring restitution for all that. Boy, God really was thoughtful about making sure that the community took care of one another, and some of these things prevented what would be normal issues if they're, and here's the key, if they're adhering to it, because we know Israel eventually said, no, we don't need, those don't apply to me, I'm not going to do those. And they just turned their back on them and did what they wanted to do. And these issues arose up. And there was lots of problems because they weren't doing what this said. When you're doing them, it helps take care of the problems in the community. Very interesting. If a man injures his own slave, it is like damaging his own property. No sin, but not very smart. If the slave dies, however, the owner is guilty of murder. Okay? Interesting stuff. Again, God's going to make sure that there's proper justice being done here. And that, because we have a life here that's lost, right? Even though it's his property, it's still a life that's in his hands. And he's liable for that life. Okay. 22 through 25.
And if men struggle with each other and strike a woman with child so that she has a miscarriage, yet there is no further injury, he shall surely be fined as the woman's husband may demand of him, and he shall pay as the judges decide. But if there is any further injury, then he shall appoint as a penalty for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, and bruise for bruise.
Wow. That's pretty clear, isn't it? Even though it's clear, I like talking about these things. So in 22 through 25, describe a situation in which men are fighting and a bystander is accidentally injured. How do you think the famous eye for eye, tooth for tooth punishment was to be implemented? So, two guys are in this fight, and the one guy gets punched, and he loses eyesight in the eye. How is this walked out? So we've got judges involved, right? Because he's interested in justice. He's interested in righteousness. He's teaching his children to walk out righteous justice. So what do we have to have first? We've got to have two witnesses that saw the one guy punch the other, right? If we've got two witnesses and they both say, yeah, he punched him, and this guy, we verify, because the judges have to verify. Can you see? They hold up the cards at certain distances, make sure he can see or not. And he really has lost his eyesight. What does this say? How do we walk this out? What happens to the guy that did the punching?
I'm assuming that people didn't really walk up to the other guy and poke his eye out. I'm guessing it's more like restitution of how much is the loss of an eye worth? How much is a tooth worth? How much is a hand or foot worth? And I don't know how they would come up with that, but I don't think it was literal.
Yeah, so it says, again, the focus is restitution. So you're right. The eye for eye is meant to guide the judges in assigning the restitution to be paid. Note that slaves are also to be given restitution. It's difficult to imagine anything more fair than this. Yes.
Would it have something to do with what wages he would lose or to be diminished because of loss of any of these one things?
So
they would have to evaluate, you used to make this much money, but now we'll have to put you on the...
So I'm guessing the judges are going to, as they look this over, what has it cost the man in the loss of the eye? What is his occupation? What's it going to cost him? What's it going to cost his family? What are the losses here? Because it's more than just his eyesight. And then how can this other man repay that loss? How can we make it just? And because God wants just balances here, and they know they're going to be able, because they've been appointed as a judge, so they're accountable higher than everybody else for what they do. So somehow they're going to figure out this is going to be fair in what he does. What if he is he's working for a man in a vineyard, and part of his job is evaluating when the grapes are ready to be harvested. And you've got to have pretty good vision to do that. Something like that would be pretty interesting. So somehow they've got to figure out how this can be resolved, because that's his job. That's how he gets paid. He works for this man that owns the vineyard. He's not going to be able to do that real well with one eye, but yet he's got to have his pay. So, and this goes back to another thing I mentioned. What will this do to, what will this do to the community members that know that if I hit him and he loses his eyesight, I'm going to have to resolve this myself? Whatever that is, whether it's money or, it would keep me from wanting to hit the guy in the eye, wouldn't it? It should, man, I don't want to hit him as mad as I am because I'm going to have to be held accountable for all the things that are lost for it. It's like going out there and punching a hole or poking a hole in my tire. Why would I do that to myself? I'm going to lose here. So did you have a comment?
I was just thinking how the whole community has to be involved in this. It wouldn't work if the judges weren't walking. Oh, sorry. Wouldn't work if the judges weren't walking by Torah,
Yeah.
which I can't think of places, but I know I've read several times where God has a problem with the judges and the people that are supposed to be administering the justice. And if there's a breakdown there, I thought of that because it's how much better would that work in our society instead of throwing someone in jail for 6 months
Yeah.
or whatever, if it actually costs them something and they learn from the lesson. But yeah, it seems to me you would have everybody got to be walking on the
Yep.
same path.
Because
so.
if you're right, if one judge perverts justice and the word gets out, then faith in the whole system now is gone. I'll give you an example. Eli says that his sons were sleeping with the women at the doorway or the curtain to come into the tabernacle. They were perverting justice. So what was everybody thinking? I can clobber that guy. They didn't do it to so-and-so last week, so they're not going to do it to me. I'm going to get away with it, so I'm going to let him have it. Everything's falling apart because it just takes one or two instances and it's done. How about the time I pointed out a couple of weeks ago where Joash had found the Torah scroll. It had been gone and disappeared for probably 100 years. They hadn't been administering justice during that time. They didn't know this stuff. And so everything was falling apart, which is why the idols and stuff were still sitting in the places. So, and I look at today, with all that's gone on in the past 3 or 4 months, there's so much faith in man and man's system. And as I've been preaching from here, we need to get focused on the kingdom and have our faith on the king and his kingdoms. That's where we get everything. That's where our hope is. Our hope lies in him. If the people could get back to this system, what a difference it would make. You wouldn't have the riots. You wouldn't have all this stuff going on. It would be non-existent. What an amazing thing. And that's why God says the hope is that we would become the light in the nations that we are to help turn things around by our action behavior, by the way that we walk, by the instruction that we give. No, that's not right. This is the right way to walk things out. Maybe part of the answer is for people like you to get into those positions to change things from the inside. Interesting. Any other thoughts, comments? Okay. All right. So the end of this chapter, I'm guessing we must be at the end of it. The end of this chapter deals with injuries caused by domestic animals. So let's read 26 through 36. Someone want to read that? 26 through 36.
When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free for the eye's sake. If he knocks out the tooth of his slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go free for the tooth's sake. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be clear. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned, but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death. If a ransom is laid on him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is laid upon him. If it gores a man's son or daughter, he shall be dealt with according to this same rule. If the ox gores a slave, male or female, the owner shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. When a man leaves a pit open, or when a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or an ass falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make it good. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead beast shall be his. When one man's ox hurts another's, so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide the price of it, and the dead beast also they shall divide. Or if it is known that the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has not kept it in, he shall pay ox for ox, and the dead beast shall be his.
Very interesting. One thing I want to make sure we get here is if an ox gores a man or woman to death, the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten. So there's other instances where a clean animal is not to be eaten. So a deer is a clean animal, and it gets hit by a car, dies. Probably 99.9% of this world would take that animal in and eat it. But God says that's not to be done. That clean animal is unedible. It's now unclean. Yes.
The reason being it wasn't bled properly. It had the adrenaline stirred up in it,
And the trauma that it went through in its death, which I think is why it says when an animal is torn, the flesh is shredded by another animal or a car, then the animal went through trauma and death, which is going to affect the meat. It's in the blood, and this traumatic death has now rendered the meat unclean. And so, yeah, it's another one of the things God has forbid us to eat, roadkill. It's a no-no. And I would presume, like everything else, it's for our benefit in our body as well. It's not just, it has more than just, it's this legalistic command. It's, as God is a wonderful Father, a great shepherd, he's taking care of us for our own good. So not to be eaten, just like this ox here. So a guy has an ox, and it's gone out and it's gored someone or something, and he's had to pay restitution for that, and he doesn't confine it, and it goes along and gores something else, and he pays restitution for it. Then the third time it actually gores someone and kills them. This man has shown a history of not being accountable and trustworthy with his own animals and the life of other people and things. And so now judgment's going to come upon his head. So what happens to him?
Seems like it's treated like first-degree murder.
That's right. He's to be killed. Yep. The Torah recognizes that accidents happen. However, if a person knowingly allows a dangerous situation to exist and an accident happens, then he bears some guilt for his negligence. How is this handled in the civil law today?
Well, I can think of, for instance, if in our area, if a pit bull, which seems to be a problem up in our area where we came from, Washington, attacks someone,
How did they deal with that?
they generally just put the animal to death. If it's a repeated thing, I think the owner can face some kind of penalty, but I don't recall it being the death penalty, though. We had a lady in a church we went to up there. She was like 85, and she got attacked by a pit bull, and it really tore her up pretty bad. And the guy split with the dog. And then we had our dog attacked by a pit bull in the neighborhood, and they couldn't prove who started it. So our dog's about this tall.
You know, and I think you're right. So it's whenever an animal kills a human being, that's when there's severe issues. So again, it brings back the responsibility to the animal owner that if I've got animals, I know that if one of my animals kills somebody, it's not, well, you poor beast, you kill it, shame on you, you hurt somebody. It's coming on me. So I'm going to make very sure that my animals are contained that can cause death are contained in a way that they can't bring about death. Wonderful thing. Responsibility. And I'm going to teach and train my children that way. I don't want them to ever be held accountable for that. And so when a community lives by this, what a wonderful thing. Because in today's society, you can't depend on your neighbor to keep his animal from jumping your fence or coming running out of his door and hurting one of your kids. You can't depend on that. But in that day, people walking by that way, you could. You didn't have to lock your windows and doors. Yeah. Yes. Isn't that sad? Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Personal responsibility. While it was recognized that accidents happen, a person still had the responsibility not to create unsafe situations in which another person might be injured. The idea of personal responsibility is of significant importance even today. The eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, I forgot to talk about this. Notice that the focus for punishment associated with harming another was on restitution. The idea was to restore what was wrongfully taken from another if possible. With this in mind, it seems obvious that the infamous eye for eye, tooth for tooth rule was intended to be a guide for judges when determining the appropriate restitution in a specific case. In other words, make sure that the value of the restitution demanded of the guilty was essentially equal to the loss of the suffered victim. Okay, I think we talked about that. All right, now we're going to go into, if no one has any comments on that, we'll go into the protection of property, chapter 22, verse 1 through 15.
Whoever steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it must pay back 5 head of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck in a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed, but if it happens after sunrise, the defender is guilty of bloodshed. Anyone who steals must certainly make restitution, but if they have nothing, they must be sold to pay for their theft. If the stolen animal is found alive in their possession, whether an ox or donkey or sheep, they must pay back double. If anyone grazes their livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray, and they graze in someone else's field, the offender must make restitution from the best of their own field or vineyard. If a fire breaks out and spreads into thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain or standing grain or the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution. If anyone gives a neighbor silver or goods for safekeeping and they're stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if caught, must pay back double. But if the thief is not found, then the owner of the house must appear before the judges, and they must determine whether the owner of the house has laid hands on the other person's property. In all cases of illegal possession of an ox, a donkey, a sheep, or a garment, or any other lost property about which someone says, "This is mine," both parties are to bring their cases before the judges. The one whom the judge declares guilty must pay back double to the other. If anyone gives a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to their neighbor or for safekeeping, and it dies, or is injured, or has taken away while no one is looking, the issue between them will be settled by the taking of an oath before the Lord that the neighbor did not lay hands on the other person's property. The owner is to accept this, and no restitution is required. But If the animal was stolen from the neighbor, restitution must be made to the owner. If it was torn to pieces by a wild animal, the neighbor shall bring in the remains as evidence and shall not be required to pay for the torn animal. If anyone borrows an animal from their neighbor and it is injured or dies while the owner is not present, they must make restitution. But if the owner is with the animal and the borrower will not have to pay. If the animal was hired, the money paid for the hire covers the loss.
Okay. Don't you love it when it's, I've said this before, I like clarity. And when you read this, it's like our Heavenly Father is giving clarity on how we're to do things and walk things out as a community. Beautiful. All right, so if the situation, or in the situation described in verses 2 and 3, why should it matter whether the thief was caught after sunrise?
He could see him after sunrise.
Huh?
He could see him?
That probably has a lot to do with it. So a thief caught at night may be a murderer and the owner is entitled to self-defense. However, it is assumed that in daylight, a person can tell if another is intent on physical harm. Personal property is not worth a human life. Interesting thought. In general, what is the punishment for stealing?
Restitution.
Huh?
Restitution would equal to, well, actually, I think you paid, more.
Yeah, I think it's, here he is, you'll pay 5 oxen for an ox, 4 for the sheep. So it's 5 for one or 4 for one, depending on the other. And then down here it says, if what is stole is found alive in his hand, he'll pay double. So you're talking anywhere from 2 to 5 times what was stolen.
Be a lot easier just to go buy one in the first place, huh?
You think that's a good deterrent to keep the community in check? Yeah, especially when it's walked out and each judge in each situation is judging rightly and they're upholding the law. When it starts being perverted, everybody loses faith in the system. What would happen if tomorrow we went to go to try to buy something with $1 or let's say $20 and they said, that's not any good here? It wouldn't take long where we would lose faith in that $20. Interesting stuff. Do you think this is a good deterrent, this type of system? Yeah. So as punishment, thieves must make restitution to their victims of between 2 and 5 times the amount. This is more productive than a prison sentence. I think we would all agree on that. Property rights. God has quite a lot to say about property. It is clearly God's plan that a person may own property and that others must respect the rights of the owner. However, property ownership is not more important than another person's right to life. Also, property ownership comes with a responsibility to help those less fortunate. So as a property owner, how am I held accountable to help those that are less fortunate? Well, number one, I've got to leave part of my field and my stuff for food for those that are in need or hungry. And 2, if I see someone down and out, didn't it say here about if someone sells himself? What did it say here? Let's see, if man goes his neighbor's donkey. No, that's somewhere here. Where did I read that? Or am I just thinking that up? Here's an interesting word, or a couple of words together. Breach of trust. And these two words, breach of trust, is one singular Hebrew word, pesha. And it is transgression or rebellion. And we talk about, forgive me my sin, my transgression, and my iniquity. So pesha is the idea of transgression. It's a breach of trust. It has to do with things involving breach of trust. Okay. Move on back down here to 16. Who would like to read verses 16 through 31?
And if a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he must pay a dowry for her to be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the dowry for virgins. You shall not allow a sorceress to live. Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. He who sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be utterly destroyed, and you shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not afflict any widow or orphan. If you afflict him at all, and if he does cry out to me, I will surely hear his cry, and my anger will be kindled, and I will kill you with the sword. And your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, you are not to act as a creditor to him. You shall not charge him interest. If you ever take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, you are to return it to him before the sun sets. For that is his only covering. It is his cloak for his body. What else shall he sleep in? And it shall come about when he cries out to me, I will hear him, for I am gracious. You shall not curse God, nor curse a ruler of your people. You shall not delay the offering from your harvest and your vintage. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. It shall be with its mother 7 days, and on the 8th day you shall give it to me, and you shall be holy men to me. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh torn to pieces in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs.
Okay. I'll back up to 16. This always gets a lot of attention. It seems so unfair, when you look at this. But remember, we're dealing with a God who is really just and really fair. So what was the penalty for seducing a virgin?
Had to pay a dowry for her to be his wife.
You know, I look at this and you have to wonder. This goes back to the father and the mother. And I think we talked about this last week, that because of this, parents were always interested to get their daughters married before they got too old where this really could happen. Because they wanted them to not have these issues happen, so they could come under the care of a man and protection of a man, especially if you've got lots of things as a father you're watching. So it's up to the dad. He's responsible for her. He's got to keep her under care so that this can't happen. If she goes out of the view and sight of people, where she can be taken by force, okay? Or she can get into a lone situation with a man, this can happen. And I'm sure it did happen. Happens a lot today. And the fathers had ultimate responsibility. If he said, no, you're not going out, it was just a no. That's what the way it was. And so the idea was to protect that innocence that she had. Because if a man has a righteous intent, he comes and approaches the dad, says, yeah, I'm interested in your daughter, and then a courtship would ensue and begin. But this here is someone really taking something without going to the person who had authority and asking. And it doesn't even talk about whether she was willing or not, but it's for sure the protocol of coming to the father wasn't walked out. The key part here is the man doing it just to take her and then I don't want anything to do with her, or did he actually take her because he does want her to be his? Well, as you can see here, he's not let off the hook no matter what. He's got to pay. And this, I must say, the sad part here is if he doesn't take her as his wife, he must pay money equal to the dowry for virgins. But now you've got a daughter that isn't no longer a virgin, and it may minimize the suitors that come calling. And as a parent, you would, I'm sure that it would have been a very sad thing. Now, as the less that God's laws were upheld, the more this is liable to happen. But in a community of righteous and just people, this should be almost non-existent. Shouldn't be happening. Now, we saw something like this walk out, didn't we? What happened to Jacob's daughter? This happened, didn't it? I mean, the sons of Shechem, the son of the king, took her and laid with her, which has made all the brothers really angry, which they sought vengeance on the men that did it. But if they were walking out righteous justice, what should have happened? This should have been walked out. Yeah. They did. Yeah, they did. And some punishment was brought upon them for it. So, yeah, it wasn't good. And the dad knew that they had done something they shouldn't have done, because we always say that even before the law was given, they knew what these laws were. The laws were in existence before Sinai. And Jacob knew this was what was supposed to be walked out. Any questions about this before we move on?
Just a quick comment. Thinking of King David, and I can't remember his son that took his
Absalom,
the daughter, and then pushed her aside.
Yeah. What was that son's name? Yes, I think you're right. Yeah. Abnon, was that his name? So yeah, Tamara. Yeah. And yeah, he was in love. He really wasn't in love with her. He just wanted her. And it infuriated the brother. So they're talking half siblings, kind of like we were dealing with in Jacob's situation. Some of these are half siblings, right? They're not, they're children of a different mother, children of a handmaid, children of Rachel. So you got all these different groups. So there was a lot of this going on even in Jacob's own family, which we've brought up many times about. This is one man, one woman solves a lot of problems. Lots of problems. Okay. Verse 16 through 20. Oh, no, here, I'm back up here. Who made the decision about whether a marriage was to take place or not? Yep, Daddy. Given the culture of that time, does this seem fair? This scenario here. Doesn't seem fair to you? Yeah. I would have to admit, in looking at it, it seemed like a way for a guy to cheat the system here. But I'm sure that the dowry for a virgin wasn't small. And so to have to pay double that amount would have been a big cost out of the person's pocket, because we're talking about you're coming into an arrangement, and now you're paying a dowry for this woman, which wasn't low dollar, and now you're going to have to pay double the price. Yes.
And then have to pay another for the wife he does get and
That's
keep.
right. Yeah, good point. And let's, well, I'm not gonna bring that up. Okay. Could you think of a situation where the dad may be against it and say, no, yeah, I'm not going to let you pay the dowry. I'm not going to let you have her. Let's say, so you got this scenario. This happens today. It actually happens in the Hebrew roots Messianic walk, where two people are interested in marriage. The dad says no, and they run off and get married without dad's approval. This says the dad has the right to say yea or nay on the marriage. What if the woman actually really liked this guy and wants to marry him? Dad says no. Is that word final here in this day? It is, isn't it? Can you think of any situations where dad would have said no?
Well, in modern days, I've seen it where a Gentile wanted to marry a Jew, and they didn't recognize them, even though they believed the same way, that they could possibly be permitted to marry. Very sad.
What if the guy wants to marry her and the daughter approaches her daddy and says, Daddy, please, I do not want to marry that man. Do not force me to come into a union with that man. Do you think a loving dad would allow that to continue? Huh? Say it again. Yeah. And these are very, because I have 8 children, 4 daughters. It's a very hard thing for me to conceive, but we know this happens. Wicked men that have their daughters were just a possession, right? And the guy who has done this is pretty loaded. And he actually is willing to give the dad 3 times the amount, even though the daughter's going, please don't. Like Fiddler on the Roof. Please don't let it happen. Please don't let it happen. I can't imagine. I mean, it's so hard to fathom all of the times that women were joined into a union that they did not want to become part of, and yet they had to. They were bound by the decision of their dad and the law of the people. What a terrible situation, huh? Terrible. Verses 16 through 20 seem to be a mismatched set of laws. What tie them together? What ties them together? So God draws a parallel between sexual activity in the human realm and idolatry in the spiritual realm. Also, various forms of paganism involved sexual activity, which we talked about that over the last week or two, about the pagan feast coming in, and how Phinehas speared the man and woman straight through. So he says you're not to allow a sorceress to live. If a person lies with an animal, it's the animal and the person both get put to death. He who sacrifices to any god other than Yahweh alone, doesn't say the word death, does it? Look at this word here. Mut. The word here destroyed is haram, to ban, devote to destruction. We'd have to look that up and get some, I really don't have the ability to do that right now, but so, well, wait a minute, we do. Hold on here. Exodus 22:20. Let's just take a look. So here's this word haram. The Greek word is also means to destroy. The Septuagint says destroy over here, but let's look at what this word means. It's haram, ban, to devote, destroy utterly. It's a devoted thing. The root is used only in the causative stems, 48 times in the Hefil. The basic meaning is the exclusion of an object from the use or abuse of man in its irrevocable surrender to God. The word is related to an Arabic root meaning to prohibit, especially to ordinary use. The word harem, meaning the special quarters for Muslims' wives, comes from it. It is related also to an Ethiopic root meaning to forbid, prohibit, lay under a curse. That's very interesting. So, it just brings my mind to something here. So, he who sacrifices any other god than the Lord alone shall come to a curse, or hello, Michael, how are you? So, I'm thinking about the northern kingdom. They sacrificed to false gods. He divorced them, but they became a curse. But what happened to Yeshua when he went on the tree? It says anyone hanging on a tree becomes a curse. So part of what he did for those that were in this ban is he became the curse to remove the ban off of those people. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. That helps get a little clarity. Do not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land. Don't afflict any widow, because if they cry out to me, not maybe, I will surely hear their cry. And my anger will be kindled. I will kill you with the sword. Right? So what if a nation was guilty in a whole of doing this, of afflicting widows and orphans? And people think it's terrible that all of a sudden this nation comes under attack and they're destroyed by the sword. Oh, it's terrible. Look how they slaughtered those people. But yet maybe the whole nation was guilty of afflicting orphans and widows for decades or centuries. We don't know. But we know God is just, and if this is coming upon them, then something must be deserving of the punishment.
I just think of when Yeshua accused the Pharisees of robbing widows of their homes, and a few decades down the road, the nation was wiped out.
Yeah. Very interesting. If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, you're not to act as a creditor. Don't charge interest. What a wonderful thing that would be today. Then I don't have to worry about interest. You shall not curse God. Now here's a good one. Ouch. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, 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 uh-huh, yeah, 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 yeah. And and he says he puts all kings in place, all rulers, and he puts they're like, yeah, he says I raised Pharaoh up for this very purpose. He says Cyrus, I brought Cyrus. He was my servant. Nebuchadnezzar, he's my servant. He comes and brings this judgment. I have called Pharaoh. I have called Nebuchadnezzar forward to bring this justice. And I think even Nebuchadnezzar said, one of them said, the Lord has given you, God Almighty has given you into my hand. He's acting like he heard from the Almighty that he was going to have success in the battle. So, this is, if we're people to walk in God's light, it's amazing if we just remember what he said to do, how much better things will go for us. What did we go to? 31? Okay. 21 through 27. Concern the treatment of others less fortunate than you. What attitude are we to have toward these people? And how is this made clear in the passage? People less fortunate.
You're supposed to treat them with kindness, like giving back the cloak. I like that one.
Yeah, yeah.
That if you took it,
Not to charge interest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So God's wanting us to be thinking and mindful of those less fortunate, which is why he's so big on the orphan, the widow, the hungry, the needy among you. Those are really the weightier matters of God's instructions. We're not to take advantage of the poor, the widow, the orphan. It seems that God is quite serious about treating those with compassion. I think he even used the word, I am compassionate, didn't he? Here we go. For I am gracious. Chanun. All right. What other social responsibilities do we have described in verses 28 through 31? So one of them is here, you shall not delay the offering from your harvest and your vintage. The firstborn of your son you shall give to me. You shall not do the same with your oxen. You shall do the same with your oxen and your sheep. It shall be with its mother 7 days, and the 8th day you shall give it to me. Now, why does he say that? What's the deal with this? Why are the sons supposed to be given to him?
God, he wants to be first in our lives. And the produce of our field or our, as our animals multiply or anything.
First fruits, yeah. First fruits.
It belongs to him.
That's part of it. This really ties into God had intended to take these firstborn sons, and they were to be the Levites. They were to be the priests. So actually the Levite word wouldn't even be in here. It would be, these are the priests. It's the firstborn sons of the nation. What changed this was the golden calf issue. And so because of the golden calf, instead of these first ones being given, it ended up being the Levites came in place of them to serve as priests. So that's why he's asking for the firstborn here. The first sons you should give to me meaning they are going to serve me in my in my tabernacle. I can't think of the scripture, but there's a one of the I think it was one of the kings or one of the guys in Israel said, the first thing that comes out of my house I'm going to give to the Lord. And his daughter comes out, and he, is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's my daughter. He tears his clothes, but he's made an oath. And because if it's an oath, he has to follow through with his word. But it implies, when you first look at it, you're looking in context, it looks like he's going to slaughter his daughter and kill her. But that's not what happens. When you do your research over this word, the words in Hebrew and Greek bear out that his daughter is now going to be given as a lifelong service. Remember how we talked about a while ago, Eli and his sons were having relations with the women at the door? Because there were women that were given to service. Even though they didn't go in, they served at the door. They were doing all kinds of service. So she was now going to be given to lifelong service at the tabernacle, which means she wasn't going to be married. That's what he's sad about. My daughter, who is longing to be married, is not going to have the privilege of being a mother or a wife. Yeah.
That's why she wanted to go out with her girlfriends whatsoever and mourn her virginity.
Yeah. So she's like, I'm now going to be all the things of motherhood, which women want to have, motherhood, to be married, all this. She's not going to have, and he knows that his dad, that she's going to be deprived of this, and I'm sure God made up for it in her service to the kingdom. But it's these things that the flesh wants. You're thinking, oh my goodness, the things you're going to miss out on. I'm certain God made up for that in the service, though. But that's some of this here about giving to me. It's a service at the tabernacle. And then you'll be holy to me, therefore you shall not eat any flesh torn to pieces in the field, throw it to the dogs. We were talking about roadkill. So, and I know people. I've got family members that have this came up in my family, that it was involved a pastor of a church, and one of the members of the congregation found a deer and brought it over and said, here, I can't use it, would you like to have it? And they took it and slaughtered it, or cut it up and butchered it and used it. And I told the person, you realize that God's against that. And they had no idea it was even in the scriptures. Because when you don't look at it, you don't know. I never read those things. How do I know? Because it's ignorance, But God doesn't like that. That's even though it's a clean animal, it's banned food. It's under the ban. It's not to be eaten. Okay. What other responsibilities do we have described in verses 23? We are not to withhold our tithes, not to curse the ruler of the people. Okay. Let's read 23, 1 through 9. Oh, wait, I wanted to read this. God on compassion. Notice that in Exodus 22, 21 through 27, God is quite strong in his instructions for how we are to interact with foreigners, widows, orphans, and others who might need some help. It seems very clear that we are required to act with compassion toward those who are less fortunate. And God's view on justice is this. It has been said that God is a perfect balance of love and justice. His perfect justice demands payment for sin, but in his perfect love, he provides us with a substitute for that payment. Do you think God expects us to conduct our lives in a way that supports this view of his nature? Micah 6:8 may provide an answer. Let's look at Micah 6:8. So it says, he has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Almighty require of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. You know what's interesting about this? I pointed this out a couple of weeks ago. You can see it in yellow over here. The Greek says, what does the Lord seek from you but to do judgment and to love mercy and to be ready to walk with Yahweh, your Elohim? Why the difference? Well, the scripture says, how can two walk together unless they are what? In agreement. Wouldn't it be amazing that God's wanting us to walk, to be ready to walk with Him in total agreement on all these things? Isn't that His goal? His goal is for us to put this on our heart, and if it's on our heart, that means we are in total agreement, and I'm ready and willing to walk with you in agreement of all that you said. Agreement meaning to do as it says. That's an awesome thing. I can see how my Elohim would want that for me, to walk in judgment, love mercy, and to do all that His Torah says. Of course. Yeah, that would be an awesome thing. That's what He wants. All right. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? Yeah. But you know what? When you say walk humbly, if you just leave it at humbly, you've got a lot of people that have abandoned part of this and say, I'm humble. I'm walking humbly, so I'm walking part of that out. And I'm just. I'm merciful. But boy, when you connect, are you walking in total agreement with Him and all that He says? Ooh, that takes it to another level. Okay. We're going to read now verses 1 through 9 of chapter 23. Who's next in line? Pat, are you going to read? Hold on. Uh-oh. We've got the battery guy ready to jump into the action here.
You shall not utter a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not follow a multitude to do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a suit, turning aside after a multitude so as to pervert justice, nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his suit. If you meet your enemy's ox or his ass going astray, you shall bring it back to him. If you see the ass of one who hates you lying under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving him with it, and you shall help him to lift it up. You shall not pervert the justice due to your poor in his suit. Keep far from a false charge, and do not slay the innocent and righteous, for I will not acquit the wicked. How far?
To 8, I think it is.
And you shall take
Or 9.
no bribe, for a bribe blinds the officials and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a stranger. You know the heart of a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Well, this is a real biggie deal. They're all big deals. I mean, bear a false report. I mean, this happens within Torah keeping people. Bearing false reports. Go ahead.
Something I just run across just recently, because I got a acquaintance that accepted a charity gift for, how do I want to say this? People that want to give and help me get a vehicle, it's 100% tax deductible. It's a gift of charity. So there's a church involved, and you donate to the church, Michael's van, and it gets 100% tax deductible.
Right.
And I thought, charity, what a wonderful way. We never thought of that. 100% tax deductible. So if we pay our taxes with a wicked man, are we guilty? I mean, if we're not to join our hands with the wicked? Wouldn't we be better off, as Israel actually teaches, to give to a righteous charity? You know what I mean? So we
Sure.
don't share the hands with our wicked government that can't even get along at this
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
It's crazy, huh? I mean, someone's thinking, but it hit me real hard
Yeah.
about the charity deal.
So, a false report in a community. So someone comes and says, or let's just say two people are gossiping about another one, and one says, "Did you know so-and-so did this?" And they never, ever went to verify whether it was true or not. Didn't verify it. Huh? What'd you say? Yeah, you got to have two witnesses. And they never bothered to go to the person or go find to see if someone else saw the event or heard of the thing or anything. And I mean, just so you know the way we try to walk things out here, if someone was to come to me and start saying something, I said, "Do you have another person with you? And have you gone to the person that you're talking about?" It usually stops it right there because the answer is no. They're wanting me to rise up and become a judge for them because they don't want to deal with it. And that's not what God wants. If you've got to deal with it now, again, responsibility, just like with my animal, if I'm responsible for it goring something, I'm going to make sure it's pinned up. If I've got to go talk to so-and-so, I'm going to be quiet because if I don't have another witness, there's no sense in going and talking to them. This will stir up trouble, right? So it just puts everything in checks and balances. But here's a biggie. You shall not follow the crowds into doing evil. Oops. Oops. Yeah, that's just happened recently. I can't believe it's here in front of us, but yet, I mean, it has happened, right? Nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice. Don't be partial. So I want to be sure I catch some of the things that the book is going through here. Laws of justice and mercy. When involved in legal disputes, how should we conduct ourselves? Righteously. Righteously and justly. Because if we don't, then we're guilty of, remember, when you look at the word for violence in the flood, or before the flood, the whole earth is full of violence. That word violence is the Hebrew word Hamas, like the people Hamas, and it means in Hebrew lacking justice and righteousness. A person that's full of violence is lacking justice and righteousness. Exactly what Michael said. God wants us to be righteous in our decisions and just in our decisions. And our behavior should be, and that's what he's teaching us. Without his instructions, we cannot walk righteous and just. We have to have his instructions to do that. When it's missing, this is how the earth gets messed up. This is how communities, families, relationships, nations get messed up. You want to know why the king of Israel finds all of these things lying around, shrines that had been built up that other kings had let sit there? Because he didn't know righteous justice because he hadn't read the Torah for 100 years. Do you know why people are not going to recognize the real Antichrist when he comes? Because they don't know righteous justice. And they're going to be misled. Fall away. It's so important to have this for our instruction, for our life. We should show no favoritism whatsoever. We should only seek pure justice. And furthermore, we should not follow the crowd. Jerry put that in the book. God considers justice to be of paramount importance. I would say here.
Why do you think he put in there not to be partial to the poor?
Well, this could go both ways. You can be partial either way. You can be partial because he's poor and actually sway things in his favor because he's a poor man. Or you could say, he's a poor guy. It's not going to matter for him. I'm going to help the guy over here who's got the money and he's well noted and well. It can go either way. And so the key thing is his status should not affect our judgment.
In the New Testament, it talks about when a person comes into the congregation well dressed. Gives me an idea behind this that perhaps it's easier for us to want to be in favor with the wealthy because then they'll be nice to us and we'd like to hobnob with them and we don't care about the other. And he's protecting the poor because of our nature.
So you brought this up, so I'm going to share it with you because you guys are new. But as a leader of this congregation, I don't want to know who gives what here. I don't handle the money because I don't want people thinking I'm preaching at them. Okay? Don't want to know. I also don't want to know the issues that the community people have. We have a set of judges that take care of those things, because if I knew that so-and-so had this problem and I am led by the Father to come up with a message, they're going to think, oh, well, he's directing that to me because he knows my situation. I don't know. I'm just doing what the Father's leading me to do, and I can honestly say there's nothing attached for me with the message. So that's probably a lot to do with what you said. Yeah. And it would be nice if most congregational leaders would follow the same practice. It's probably true that some don't. So, all right. According to verse 4 and 5, let's scroll down here. What is your responsibility for the property and welfare of others, even those who hate you? Do you know, I taught my kids, based on what I show here, or see here, the God's instructions, if I borrowed something from Michael, and I've got possession of it, I'm to return it to him in the same or better condition as what I borrowed it. But that's not walked out that way in most places, in most circles. Person borrows a generator, goes and uses the generator. They run it in the ground and the person gets it back and he can't start the thing. It's just not starting. Or a person lets somebody use a car and their kids spill all kinds of drinks in it. And there's stains on the carpet. There's stains in the seat. They did things in the car that makes the car smell, and they can't get the odor out. They bring it back to the owner and say, hey, thanks for letting us use it. We appreciate it. Here's the car back. That's not righteous justice. It's not the way that God teaches us to do things. If I see my neighbor's dog run out of the yard, gate got left open, it's my job to go and see that dog gets in there if I can't find the owner. Why? Because I saw it. If you don't want to be held accountable to that, then keep your eyes in your house and don't look out. But if you're aware of it, it's now your responsibility.
Do you suppose the reason Yah put that rule in there is because he's verifying that animals are important to him?
Absolutely.
not just the people.
Yep.
You can be mad at a guy, but don't
Yeah.
forget that animal was made by me too.
Yeah. Yep. Good word. You see the donkey of the one who hates you lying helpless under its load? You shall refrain from leaving it to him. You shall surely release it with him. So this brought up a thing that I shared with my wife. Driving down the road in the car and see someone pulled over a flat tire. It's raining outside. It's 118 out. You're in your real nice clothes. It's snowing out. You don't have your jacket. I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios, right? What are we to do? You see your neighbor out there. This happened just a couple of weeks ago. The storm came when there was the heavy winds blew and trees were snapping and whatnot. The guy down the road, we were out for a walk. I saw the guy's big limb had broken and had fallen down. And I went to go offer help. He refused to help. And so, but I was willing to help the guy get this squared away and taken care of. Because I see it was a job. It was a burden, right? So I offered some assistance. Of course, it's up to them to take the assistance or not. But if we just, in a society like that, wouldn't it be amazing? Issues would be resolved. But it just takes one person or two and three to start deteriorating it, and it all goes haywire. Let's review 10 through 13. I'll read it for you guys. You shall sow your land for 6 years and gather in its yield, but on the 7th year, and we'll look at this word, the Shavi year, you shall let it rest, shamat, and lie fallow, so that the needy of your people may eat, and whatever they leave, the beast of the field may eat. You are to do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove. Now, I mentioned this the other day, that they would fulfill the letter of the law by leaving one stalk of grain standing, or they would leave, 3 olives on the tree, pick it all but 3 olives. I've fulfilled the letter of the law. I can now feed and give somebody. Really, come on, 3 olives. What's that going to provide for somebody? But however, if a guy left quite a bunch of trees, I mean, he may be harvesting 1,000 trees. What does it hurt to leave 10 trees, a tenth, for the poor? What hurt is that, right? 10 olive trees. People come by, they can get some olives if they need some olives. He's got 990 trees now to himself. What difference does it make if he loses 10? But, there were people in the day that go ahead, Michael. Mm-hmm. No, that's right. Yeah. 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 If you're going from Queen Creek to Tempe, and along the way you get hungry and you pass a field, you shouldn't have to worry about being hungry. You should be able to go out there and pick it and eat and satisfied. He says only get what you need for that moment and go on. You can't put it in your shirt. You can't pack your pants full of it. I remember I was managing a company, and when the office did real good, those that played golf, the general manager and I was the sales manager, we would take some of the people out to play a round of golf. And we'd pay for the round, we'd pay for the cart and everything, and we'd pay for their drinks as the cart lady came around. And there was one person that made the general manager so angry because, and he did it every single time, that she'd come by and he would get 2 and stuff his pocket with one of them. Come back around. Give me 2 T's, and a T goes in the pocket. And it made the general, and he had right. According to Torah, did he have right? He should have had the one drink, and when the next come around, you need have a drink. But you're not supposed to take over and above and stuff your pockets full with the other, right? So he had right to be upset, but the guy never stopped doing it. He did it every single time, no matter what happened. That's the way it was. He walked it out. So God wants to take care of the people. Let it rest. Let it lay fallow. The beast is to eat. All those things are supposed to be taken care of. And I want to be sure I get to the other. 6 days you do your work. 7th day you shall cease from your labor, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your female slave, as well as your stranger, may refresh, nafash, themselves. Now, concerning everything which I have said to you, be on your guard, and do not mention the name of other gods, nor let them be heard from your mouth. Okay. Do you think giving the land a year's rest every 7 years is a good idea?
Can we go back to that other thought before you get into
Sure.
that one? Where do you see that they're only supposed to take enough for that moment? Because I'm thinking of Ruth that gleaned in the corners of the field, and she took home bundles.
Well, it's, let me look here and see if I can find it. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So in a Shemitah is a little different. Yeah. It may be the Shemitah is a little different, but I think it says,
I know the disciples picked grain when they were walking with Yeshua and were condemned for it.
yeah.
And that was different. They were only eating enough for themselves for that day, but I don't know where it says that you can't leave the corners for the poor to get all they need.
So let's just look at the Omer, the manna that was coming in. So he says only every man should take as much as he should eat. You should only take an Omer apiece according to the number of persons in each house and his tent. In other words, not over an abundance. Just like you can't have 2 days worth, just enough for the day. I'm not finding it, so I'll have to. I'm pretty certain that it's that whenever you're out there gathering, you're only allowed to get what you could eat. You weren't allowed to put it in a fold of your garment and carry off over an extra.
Well, maybe they could take enough for themselves and their household, because she brought things back to Naomi.
Yeah.
For the day,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. She was gleaning. Yeah, it is gleaning. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah. Right. I'll have to. I'll look that up, because now you've got me. I'll have to look that up. So I'll try to have an answer for you on next Tuesday.
So
Okay.
what's your question about the Sabbath?
And so do you think it's fair that the land should have a rest every 7 years?
I would say yes, because I've heard over the years that we've depleted our soil so much from just continually taking and taking and taking. So it seems to me that God knows what he's talking about there.
So if he's letting the field lay fallow on the 7th year, does the field owner, is he taken care of too? If he's not out harvesting, does that mean he gets a vacation? He doesn't have to harvest it. So yes, but I mean, he doesn't have to do the harvesting part, which it's, I mean, I know when the hands to the land in Israel whenever they are over there helping with the vineyards. It's a lot of work. You're over there, yeah. There's a lot of rest going on. Yeah. Which is why when Yeshua comes back, there's going to be a period of rest. Very nice. I like vacations, right? Vacations are nice. So God is thinking about the labor as well. Probably one other question before we go. How do you think the farmers would survive during this 7th year?
I would say they probably, knowing the law, saved up ahead of time so they wouldn't starve to death over the year.
So agricultural experts have concluded that resting the land every few years helps productivity, which you mentioned. The government even has programs for it. Even though the land was not planted in the 7th year, the farmers could reap whatever crops came up naturally, and furthermore, they could store up for the 7th year, like you said. So good answers. I want to thank all of you for joining us online, and thank you, those of you, Bud and others, for joining on the Zoom. Thank you, those of you that are here, for coming in. Let me say a prayer. Father, we thank you for the lesson today, for we were gleaning from your word and enjoying what you revealed and shared with us, and open our eyes and our hearts to. May it change us. May we be forever more challenged. We thank you for your Spirit guiding us and for your word that is in our hearts and our minds. We give you praise in your Son Yeshua's name. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Have a blessed week. Shalom.